Get that feed off my floor, now. I want every relay node in Sector 6 shut down before Taikar smells it. Technician Rel Varn's voice thundered across Earth's orbital early morning station, his boots rattling the grated floor as he stomped toward the command desk. The room vibrated, with the drag of clunky chairs pulled back in haste, the slap of palms on analog control panels, and the rising whine of outdated capacitors fighting to stay relevant in a war Earth hadn't even declared yet. "Too late," muttered Colonel Joran Valt from the corner, his arms folded, the sleeves of his battered field jacket rolled up to the elbows. "They heard it, and they won't ignore it." The room froze. Every man turned to look at him, the ghost of the Alpine skirmishes, the soldier who'd walked away from his medals. He hadn't spoken in 20 minutes. When he did, it was with the tone of someone who'd seen what came after hope ran out. Outside the reinforced viewport high above the thermosphere, Earth rotated in soft blue arcs. Beneath that peaceful swirl, somewhere under layers of misinformation and old defense treaties, something had lit up. Raw fusion, not just theoretical anymore. It burned hot, dirty, and fast. Not a test, not a lab leak. A message from a species who had never asked permission to exist. On the fortress world of Taikar, far beyond the rim of human reach, the Galactic Concord's ruling council gathered in their vault citadel, 30 kilometers of fused obsidian shielding mines that bent others like reeds in floodwater. The chamber air crackled with bioelectric tension as High Strategist Yor Hasku ran one long finger over the rotating planetary feed suspended mid-air. Earth's signal spiked again. Backwater filth, they've lit fusion like it's a firecracker. Around him, representatives of the 47 species murmured in various dialects, some through voice, others through linked neural emitters. The consensus was unanimous. Primitive, unsanctioned species playing with core-grade energy was a risk, one that required response, immediate, demonstrative, and permanent. The Sithar offered their services. A flotilla, fully telepathic, would arrive within 72 Earth hours. Their task was simple: extract submission, disable all fusion technology, force integration into the Concord's hierarchy, or level their planetary crust as warning. Back on Earth, deep inside the Alpine Military Integration Bunker, Unit 9A, known to its architects simply as Iron Nest, Joran Valt stared at the table that wasn't a war room yet, but would be. He stood alone before the wall-mount field panel as the floor above them groaned under the shifting weight of diplomatic transports arriving from every fragmented government on Earth. They came in fear, disguised as unity. Joran didn't turn to greet the line of suits behind him. He didn't salute. Instead, he lifted a rust-flecked tablet from the table and dropped it hard enough to echo. "They're not sending ambassadors. They're sending puppeteers. If we let them inside our heads, we're done." General Torvik Ron, Earth's Intercontinental Negotiations Chair, stepped forward. "We can't shoot first. If we respond with aggression..." "They're not coming to negotiate," Joran said flatly. "They're coming because they think we'll kneel. They only ask questions to learn what part to break." The room filled with heat, not from any heater but from the sheer friction of a dozen conflicting agendas grinding into one another, united only by dread, the leaders argued. Some spoke of evacuation options. Others debated scrambling the orbital fleet. None had fired a weapon in anger in 30 years. Then the feed lit up. No countdown, no translator delay, a visual formed. Black throne, silver ambient mist, and, at its center, the Sithar emissary. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Every man in the bunker went rigid. A few stumbled backward, eyes dilated, sweat pouring down their temples. 2 collapsed outright, screaming about things they hadn't seen. Memories inserted, twisted, rearranged. One delegate, clawed at his own face until his staff pulled him away. Joran didn't move. The Sithar figure's head tilted. A low mental pulse ran through the room like static, drowning synapses. Joran felt it brush against the edges of his mind, searching, pushing, assuming entry. It found nothing. Just a wall. Years of mental partitioning, torture survival training, and neural dissociation sealed his mind like tungsten. The probe recoiled. Joran stepped forward. No. He pressed a panel. The feed cut. The display didn't fade, it cracked. Glass fracturing outward in a spiderweb, as if recoiling from the force of a denied entry. "What have you done?" hissed Minister Cor Bellin, grasping his skull like he was still hearing voices. "You've ended any chance we had." "No," Joran answered, calm. "I just gave us one." He looked around the room. Men trying to blink away tears that weren't theirs, heads bowed as if their thoughts had been dragged outside and paraded. He stepped over the twitching legs of the delegate still being medicated and faced the remaining staff. "They won't wait long. Their deadline is a performance, a warning. They think we'll fold before the real strike lands. They're wrong." "And what do you suggest?" Ron asked, slowly regaining his breath. "You want to hit back now? With what?" Joran glanced at the old military interface beside him. No glowing map, no neat icons, just a battered switchboard and 3 blinking standby lights that hadn't been green in decades. Federation's ability to control exosolar. "I want access to Project Tempest archives. I want immediate comms blackout for all fusion networks. And I want full command authority." Ron frowned. That program was decommissioned. It was unsafe. It was ungovernable, Joran corrected, and that's the only reason it still scares anyone. He pulled out a thick folder from his duffel bag and slammed it on the table. Orion Drive isn't a myth. It's mothballed, not dead. And if they're coming for us, we won't meet them with peace conferences. We'll meet them with fire strapped to steel. Above them, Earth spun unaware. Taikar watched. And Joran Vault reached for something the galaxy had forgotten existed, not diplomacy, not fear. A plan they wouldn't see coming. The doors of the Alpine Command Vault slammed shut behind Joran Vault, sealing in the heat of decisions no leader wanted to make. Inside, air purifiers clicked under stress, filtering the sweat, the fear, the electric bite of bodies that hadn't rested in days. Earth's delegation gathered around a low steel table covered in emergency communiques, override keys, and a cracked data pad still bleeding from the Sithar broadcast. A soft chime came from the central console. The countdown had begun. 71 hours, 48 minutes. A new transmission arrived, this time pre-recorded. The alien voice didn't speak in syllables, but in neurological pulses translated into human syntax through adaptive code. The ultimatum was brutal. Disable all fusion technologies, cease all research, submit planetary command within 3 planetary rotations. Failure to comply will result in planetary restructuring. There was no ambiguity in restructuring. The term was clinical, the meaning wasn't. Global riots followed within hours. In Shanghai, mobs torched university labs rumored to host fusion prototypes. In Sao Paulo, citizens broke into communication towers demanding answers. In Lagos, gunfire was heard outside the diplomatic housing quarter. The world teetered on the edge, not from alien attack, but from its own disbelief. Inside the iron nest, Joran watched the chaos unfold on a physical projection grid. No fancy holographics, just a 4-pane screen bolted into the concrete. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, blood pounding behind his eyes. Every instinct told him the aliens expected panic. That fear was part of their opening tactic. "They think we'll fracture," he said aloud. "They're not wrong," replied Torvik Ron, motioning to a live feed showing the Paris embassy's courtyard engulfed in flames. "They're too early," Joran countered. "We haven't fractured yet. We still have time to pretend we're breaking." Ron leaned back. "You're talking deception?" "A I'm talking choreography, Joran snapped. They think they've trapped us in our own technology. Fine, let's show them a performance. He walked toward the classified archive interface, manual, shielded, older than half the men in the room. He keyed in a dead authorization code. Archive Orion Drive, he said. The display buzzed, then offered access. General Ron stepped closer. That program's buried under 10 separate safety bands. It doesn't just burn fuel. It hurls bombs. And it's the only thing that'll outrun their targeting systems, Joran replied. We're not trying to fight their fleet. We're trying to make them believe we already launched. He turned to the group. We make it look like surrender. We broadcast disarmament. Let them believe they've beaten us. Meanwhile, we go underground. Antarctica's reserve vaults still hold 5 launch-ready shells. We retrofit the engines. We simulate failures. And when they drop their guard, we deploy ghosts, muttered an older officer. Exactly, Joran nodded. They'll see a fleet. Not know what powers it. Not know how often we can do it. That unknown is our leverage. But it's not sustainable, said Keir Nomar, chief engineer of Earth's obsolete propulsion core as he stepped into the room. The man looked like he hadn't slept in years because he hadn't been called on in years. You use it once, and you're finished. These drives consume entire payloads just to jump once. They don't need to know that, Georgian said. They just need to believe we can launch again. Nomar exchanged a look with his old lab partner, Dravik Salm, who had followed him in, trailing a wheeled case of schematics, physical keys, and a relic drive filled with radiation-shielding blueprints. We'll need 3 days, Salm said. You've got 2.5, Joran replied. The Iron Nest's sub-bays groaned as hatches long welded shut hissed open. Frosted corridors, once used for nuclear payload transport, were scrubbed by emergency crews, every surface scanned for radiation leaks, then repressurized. In Bay 7, the first of the old Dread-class chassis was unshackled from its mooring cradle. Workers in thermally sealed gear climbed into access tubes, last touched when most of them were still children. Above ground, Earth played its part. News anchors wept on cue, standing before disassembled reactor cores and staged demolitions. Cameras rolled as political leaders signed surrender drafts and broadcast apologies to an audience of stars. One by one, reactors were shut down, except they weren't. The video was looped. The plants still ran on backup cycles beneath ground-level bunkers, sealed under 80 meters of reinforced permafrost. Do you really think they're buying this? Asked Ron as he walked beside Joran through the lower command ring. Not buying, dismissing, Joran replied. They're too arrogant to verify. The Sithar don't see lies, they smell fear. And right now, we're feeding them exactly what they expect. In Taikar's citadel, the Concord Council convened once more. The primary observation deck showed Earth's broadcasts in real time. The chair of sectoral surveillance, Lord Mehvarat, gestured idly at the images of collapsed fusion towers and teary-eyed politicians. They fall without us even striking, he said, teeth bared in amusement. Yara Hasku gave a nod of approval. A species so quick to submit has no place in future wars. Back on Earth, the 5th retrofit bay came online. Solm and Nomar worked side by side, fingers blistered from welding reactor stabilizers into old military shells. They operated in shifts, coordinating engineers like surgeons, making sure every line of coolant, every explosive plate, every magnetic casing would hold. For at least one thrust, Joran's face remained unsmiling as he oversaw the ops feed. We need them to believe there are 10 ships coming, even if we only launch 4. Telemetry, asked Ran. Scrambled. We'll flood their scanners with ghost images during launch. They'll see signatures we don't have. Won't they know? Not until they run. And that was the plan. Not to overpower them. Not to chase. Not to win in numbers or strength or doctrine. The goal was to make the stars second-guess Earth. Inside Bay 3, one of the ship's internal corridors vibrated under a manual systems check. Joran ran his palm along the cold support beam. It smelt like stale oil and ice, No grandeur, no myth, just metal forged for deterrence. The kind of ship that didn't make promises, it made final statements. He turned to Nomar. How long until we can simulate first ignition? 20 hours, Nomar said. But you won't get a second burn. Once we go, we can't return. Joran didn't hesitate. Then we don't miss. The first Orion ignition test shook the mountain shelf. A dull concussion rolled beneath the Antarctic crust, muffled by 300 meters of reinforced ice and rock. Frost dust rained from the steel struts bolting Vault Theta to the bedrock. Inside, engineers locked down the second stage stabilizer with hydraulic clamps, their palms blackened with burn gel and cold sweat. Joran Velt stood above the chamber floor, watching flame residue flicker across the test shielding like war paint. He didn't speak. His silence wasn't approval, it was calibration. He was measuring every man in the room, noting who flinched when the pulse chamber lit, who blinked at the tremor, who looked away. Drakik Solm wiped his hands with a thermal cloth and turned toward him. Chamber integrity held, but we had a pressure spike in line 3. Was it sabotage? Joran asked without changing his stance. Unlikely, Solm replied, but not with certainty. The shield mesh wasn't rated for that sequence. We stretched it. Stretch it again and it snaps, Joran said, scanning the chamber techs. Run background on every name that walked in here after midnight. Double-check military vetting against the Interpol list. Kerr Nomar's voice echoed up from the lower bay. If you want this drive ready in time, we'll need more trust and less paranoia. Joran leaned over the railing. We're not building a fleet. We're building a lie, and lies crack easier than steel. He walked down the gantry stairs as the coolant pumps vented steam into the recycled air. The bitter tang of scorched alloy and aging insulation clung to every surface. Joran inhaled through his teeth, sorting fear from friction. He passed through a decontamination seal and entered ops control. Earth's puppet broadcasts were playing on mute across a wall of mounted screens. Images of ceremonial reactor shutdowns, empty laboratories staged with dismantled cores, orbital satellites turned toward the planet in mock submission. But beneath the surface, the real transmissions flowed along fiber-thin encrypted channels, coded signals triggering movement in bunkers across the globe. Every false surrender was timed to a covert launch prep, every tearful political speech backed by an off-screen order to arm. Joran reviewed the sublayer traffic. Every message passed through 5 relay points before reaching its destination, disguised within meteorological data and financial summaries. Even if intercepted, the signals wouldn't register. He'd had the encryption designed by men who'd once smuggled intelligence across collapsed states with nothing but coin-sized processors sewn into jacket seams. In Taikar, the Concord Council didn't even bother to hide their amusement anymore. They're staging their own extinction, Yorhasku remarked to his aides, waving one finger across a planet-scale schematic as Earth's reactors blinked out on screen. They dismantle their tools while we sharpen ours. The Scythar flagship had shifted orbit twice in the last 6 hours. Surveillance from Earth's adaptive telescopes showed ventral adjustments consistent with bombardment vector calibration. The aliens weren't just watching anymore, they were getting in position. Joran convened the Defense Synod in the Alpine Corps bunker. He stood before them, not with ceremonial address, but with hands dirtied by machinery and maps still smudged from reactor soot. We have no fleet to match theirs, he said, pacing slowly across the room. No shield strong enough to weather an orbital barrage. No time to scale our infrastructure to parity. What we have is intent, and the ability to make them believe that intent has teeth. An aide tapped into the satellite grid, showing the Scythar ship. Its silhouette jagged, plates overlapping like armor layered over bone. The projection zoomed into the orbital arc. 6 weapon pods now faced Earth. They've completed grid targeting, the aide reported. Impact zones calculated. They'll fire if they suspect delay. Joran didn't blink. Then we don't delay, we move. He pointed at the lower display, the Orion staging platforms buried in the polar trench zones. We accelerate the launch cycle. 2 ships go early, the others follow behind. They'll think it's a battle group, fully fueled. They'll retreat to regroup. That's our window. Here Nomar stepped forward. We can't fuel all 4 ships to combat distance, not unless we siphon from civilian grid reserves. Do it, Joran said. Divert power from every grid between 60 and 75 degrees latitude. Reframe it as atmospheric lockdown protocol. The public will obey. They already believe we surrendered. Minister Halran, head of public operations, looked uneasy. If the Concord learns we faked reactor deactivation, they'll respond with full planetary culling. You realize what you're risking. I'm not gambling with the truth, Joran said sharply. I'm weaponizing what they think truth looks like. The room quieted. Later, in the lower bay, the second Orion ship entered final retrofitting. Workers reinforced the internal dampeners, bolts cracking under thermal torque as they forced them into place. The stench of coolant fluid mixed with the sting of unfiltered air vents. One man dropped his wrench and vomited beside the main conduit. He didn't stop working. Joran walked the catwalk as he briefed the lead pilot, Commander Trin Voss, one of the last men alive to complete high-orbit re-entry with an unshielded core during the Martian supply crisis. Once you light that drive, you'll have 90 seconds before guidance fails, Joran said. You won't be able to turn. You won't have comms past the troposphere. I don't need to speak, Voss said. I just need them to see me coming. Joran nodded once. You won't be alone, but your trajectory has to sell distance. You're the spear. They'll assume more behind it. And if they call the bluff? Joran answered without hesitation. Then we never mattered to begin with. Voss turned back toward his vessel. Joran remained behind, eyes narrowing as the orbital track overlay updated. The Sithar had started power calibration, visible fluctuations along their upper spine. That meant final targeting cycles were active. The countdown to Earth's destruction had begun. Joran activated the command terminal, inserted the override key, and sent a single-line command through 5 encrypted relays. Begin misdirection protocol. From the Arctic to the Andes, energy pulses ignited beneath the ground. False drives, decoy emissions, radio bleeds. To an unprepared observer, Earth had just deployed an entire fleet. The Concord wouldn't verify it, they'd interpret it. And by the time they doubted it, Earth's real weapons would already be moving. Joran Volt examined the retrieved shuttle through the quarantine window, its surface still stained from the original crash in Nevada decades prior. The fuselage looked warped, not from damage, but from time. Repairs patched with salvaged alloys, cabin pressure recalibrated for human lungs. Every modification bore the signature of Earth's adaptation. Behind him, Commander Brevik Tor reviewed the mission schematic without comment. His eyes scanned each vector entry point, wrist twitching with muscle memory as he ran simulated breach paths in his head. You've seen the layout, Joran said. You still want it? Brevik didn't turn. You need someone whose mind doesn't wander. That's not what worries me, Joran replied. What worries me is what happens when it does. The shuttle launch was silent to the world above, buried beneath a subglacial trench in Sector 12. The internal launch crew ran final diagnostics with gloves still damp from decontamination fluid. No countdown, no ceremony, just a flick of green on the console, a crack of magnetic locks, and the shuttle slid from the hangar, swallowed by night. Inside, the 5-man infiltration unit strapped into modded harnesses, each rigged with nerve pulse dampeners sewn directly into the chest plate. Brevik sat at the front, helm unlatched, his breath steady, unfazed. He hadn't spoken since launch. He wouldn't speak until they reached the entry point. The Sithar Dreadnought loomed in the black like an insect wrapped in armor, its structure angular and pulsing, alive in ways no human ship could mimic. The approach vector narrowed. They threaded between blind spots left open by Concord doctrine, Trusting the Sithar would never expect infiltration from within one of their own designs, the first tremor hit 10 kilometers from docking range. Private Jayesh Kir gasped, head snapping to the side, nostrils flaring. His hands gripped his rifle tighter than needed. His voice cracked. "She's here. My sister, she's..." Revik activated the countersink on Kir's harness. The jolt was physical, like slamming a live wire through a muscle. Kir screamed once, then steadied, eyes wide but locked forward. "They're brushing the edge," Revik said finally. "Next one won't be gentle." They docked beneath the Dreadnought's auxiliary storage bay, unused, unsupervised, shielded by obsolescence. The hatch opened with a hiss of thawed pressure and exposed the alien interior. Floors made of ribbed polycarbonate sinew, ceilings that shifted with soft folds like breathing skin. The air inside wasn't cold, but it made sweat bead down their backs. Their boots stuck slightly with each step, the floor absorbing impact, refusing to echo. The walls bent light subtly, disrupting depth perception. Rifles wavered with each movement, the iron sights never holding still. The ship was designed to disorient, built not as a vessel, but as an environment of subjugation. Kir stumbled again. "I heard him this time," he whispered. "My father. His last words." Revik didn't slow. "That's not memory. That's bait." He pointed to the wall. "Node chambers east of the core spine. We reach it, plant the charge, and trigger the brake." Private Varn slipped on the sloped incline. The sweat rolling down his face smelled off, something clinical buried beneath fear. He wiped it without breaking stride. Ahead, the corridor narrowed, ending at a curved archway inscribed with layered ridges pulsing with bioelectric flickers. A command pulse activated in response to their proximity. The chamber door folded open. Not slid, not hissed. Folded, like skin retracting under a scalpel. Inside was the mind node. Not a console, not a server. A suspended lattice of pulsar crystals floating within a dampened field, linked by glowing threads that pulsed in rhythm. It was not a machine. It was a nerve cluster. Organic, twitching, connected to every Sithar aboard. Varn dropped first, hands to ears, screaming. His helmet clattered across the chamber as he curled in on himself, sobbing with a voice that wasn't his. Sergeant Levick raised his rifle, only to freeze. Eyes locked on something no one else could see. "Abort," he muttered. "We're too late. The bombardment's already begun. Earth's..." Revik stepped past him and pressed the pulse override into the back of Levick's armor. The man collapsed without protest. "We're not too late," Revik said. He stepped toward the core. The field reacted. Tendrils of light reached toward him like curious limbs. His headset began to crackle. Not audio. Pressure. Thoughts not his own slipped into the edge of his vision. He saw a chair, his brother's coat, an old apartment light swinging overhead. He bit down hard enough to draw blood from his lip. He slid the carbon charge into the base housing beneath the node lattice, his hands steady despite the tremor in his jaw. He activated the arming coil. The light flickered red. The node responded violently. The air became dense, not with pressure, but with presence. Every corner of the chamber felt like it was staring. The floor heaved beneath their boots, as if the ship itself were trying to reject them. Revik turned back toward Kir, who now kneeled, dazed but breathing. "Time's up." He triggered the charge. It didn't explode, it severed. The lattice shattered into a million screaming threads of light, every connection sliced mid-thought. A blast of air shoved them back as the link ruptured. Every Sithar across the flotilla lost cohesion in a single moment. It was like yanking the spinal cord out of a beast that didn't know it had one. Across the Dreadnoughts, targeting systems dropped to standby. Communications ceased mid-order. The mental chorus that had unified them became fragmented whispers, no longer coherent enough to command. Joran Valt stood inside Ops Control back on Earth, staring at the satellite uplink as every Sithar vessel froze in low orbit, their formation unraveling. "Report?" Ron asked, breath caught. Joran didn't look away. "They can't hear each other anymore." In the Sithar flagship, Brevik helped Kier to his feet, dragging Varn by his vest. They moved quickly. The node was dead. But so was the illusion of invincibility. Snow split open as reinforced bay doors tore backward on hydraulic arms. Steam hissed skyward where heat from the Orion drive cores vaporized glacial ice in sheets. Whiteout winds whipped across the launch fields, colliding with the growing thunder beneath Earth's southernmost stronghold. Joran Valt stood inside the buried command silo, knuckles bruised from gripping the overhead guardrail as the countdown entered its final cycle. Talon 1 sat at the heart of Bay Omega, its armored hull coated in ablative shielding, reactor core locked and charged. There were no launch sequences, no orbital towers. These ships weren't designed to rise. They were meant to erupt. Green across all channels, called Commander Tren Voss from the central console. Talon 1 at full burn. Palisade, Dragnet, and Sharon report secondary ignition in progress. Outside, the last access ramp lifted, sealing the payload bay beneath armor thicker than any naval cruiser Earth had ever fielded. Reactor safeties disengaged with an audible snap through the chamber walls. Every man in the launch bunker flinched. Only Joran moved closer. "They'll see it," he said to Voss. "Every species watching Taikar's feeds will see what they never prepared for." "Launch vectors locked," Voss confirmed. "Pale skies ready." Joran keyed his command authorization, thumbprint pressed into the hardened override casing. A low-frequency vibration rolled through the silo as the Orion cores began chained ignition. The deck floor rattled, the venting ports glowed. "Let it rise," Joran ordered. The launch wasn't clean. Talon 1 burst upward in a tidal wave of flame and shattered ice, the sonic pressure breaking layers of permafrost in concentric waves. Its frame punched through stratospheric drag in under 12 seconds, wrapped in blue-white energy and fragment trails from its own acceleration buffers. 3 more followed, leaving gaping voids in the ice fields, now collapsing inward like the planet itself had exhaled war. In orbit, the Sithar formation began to react, but their delay was fatal. Targeting arrays, tuned for intercepting slow-maneuvering vessels, overshot their calibrations as the Earth ships streaked upward with speeds unmatched by Concord doctrine. The energy coils meant to trap cruisers fizzled against hulls that never paused long enough to be touched. Inside Talon 1, the internal cabin was a furnace. Reactor coils whined under compression, anti-shock plating groaned with every stress differential. Joran climbed into the forward seat beside Voss, his harness cinched so tight it pressed bone to steel. "They're spreading," Voss reported. "Sithar command ship shifting toward mid-size retreat, their flankers folding inward." "Good," Joran said, voice hoarse. "We cut the throat." He tapped the forward input. The Dreadnought's silhouette appeared, Angularin, covered in overlapping fins like a buried blade halfway drawn. Voss set trajectory, impact in 23 seconds. The Sithar formation began to realign, but the neural node was gone. Orders weren't flowing. Their formations staggered. One cruiser turned too late and collided with its wingmate, sending both spinning into the thermosphere. Joran watched the Dreadnought grow larger in the viewport. "You ever dream of flying straight through your enemy?" Voss didn't answer. He gripped the helm with both hands. Talon 1 slammed forward, hull vibrating so hard the cabin lights blinked under the strain. Their impact trajectory left no room for secondary correction. They weren't maneuvering. They were guiding, a weapon into its final vector. "Break lock," Jordan barked. The external casing snapped free, the last shield layer peeling backward. Plasma coils bloomed along the Orion ring, giving one final thrust. The Talon collided with the Sithar Dreadnought at just under orbital relativistic burn. Impact was not an explosion. It was reduction. The bow of the human ship split the Dreadnought in half, energy flaring through the alien vessel's spinal corridor. Internal chambers ignited in sequence, rupturing containment cells one after the other. Debris spiraled into low orbit, striking 2 additional Sithar ships caught too close. They shuddered under the impact, power failing across entire decks. Joran's head slammed against the interior wall, blood trickled from his temple as alarms blared around him. Talon 1's rear engines flickered, half its hull torn backward by the exit wound it created through the Dreadnought's remains. "We're still live," Voss groaned from the control seat beside him. "Then finish it," Joran rasped. He activated external comms, opened a full-frequency broadcast on every channel the Concord monitored. "This is Earth's Fleet Commander. Withdraw your remaining forces. If your next signal targets this planet, Taikar burns." The feed transmitted uninterrupted for 15 seconds. Every word delivered, every image burned into the feed. The sight of a single Earth vessel, hollowing out the deadliest Sithar ship in orbit. Taikar's council chamber erupted in noise. Dozens of species delegates shouted over one another as the live footage of the Dreadnought collapse rolled on repeat. The High Strategist stood frozen, mouths ajar as sub-commanders raced to verify the footage. "They're not supposed to have anything that moves like that," one Concord analyst whispered, sweating through his scales. "They don't," another replied. "That wasn't a fleet. That was suicide by math." Yor Haskew slammed his palm against the control node. "Retreat the Vanguard, reconfigure orbitals, initiate fallback scenario." The order swept across the fleet in waves, but not fast enough. Earth's remaining Orion ships now occupied forward orbit, their reactor cores at minimal capacity but still burning enough to suggest another launch. Inside Talon 1, systems crackled, and the stabilizers groaned beneath fractured panels. Joran looked at the forward display. The Scythar fleet had stopped moving. "They're not responding," Voss said, rubbing his arm where a restraint had nearly broken skin. "Not retreating, not firing. They're waiting to see what else we can do," Joran muttered. "Let's not show them." He leaned forward and cut the primary transmit channel. The Bluff had landed. Now Earth just had to keep breathing long enough for it to work. Talon 1 drifted. The outer hull, buckled from impact, shimmered under orbital light as cooling panels glowed with residual heat. Inside the forward bay, sparking conduits hissed behind exposed shielding. Vibration ran through the floor intermittently. Enough to suggest power, but not enough to mask the reality. They were out of thrust. Joran Valt stood at the viewing slit, sweat drying on his collar, chest heaving with each breath. The straps of his harness still bit into his shoulders, stiff with dried blood. Beneath him, systems flickered on reserve. Reactor coils had gone dormant. There would be no second surge. "How long can we maintain the field signature?" he asked without turning. Commander Tren Voss, seated nearby with his ribs taped in 3 places, tapped on a side console. 4 hours at best. After that, thermal masking fails, and they'll see we're running on fumes." "Good," Joran said quietly. "That's long enough to make them think we're choosing not to move." The bluff worked only as long as the Concord kept guessing. One wrong twitch, one pattern break, and every orbiting Sithar vessel would open fire. Joran wasn't gambling with lives anymore. He was trading illusion for time. Down on Earth, the broadcasts had already changed. Screens lit up with images of Sithar wreckage, falling through clouds, debris glinting as it broke apart in atmosphere. The footage looped endlessly, commentators calling it a miracle, parliaments claiming tactical brilliance. In the streets of Mumbai, Berlin, and Johannesburg, civilians poured from shelters chanting Earth's name. They believed it was over. They believed it had been a fight. In truth, the fleet above them was static, locked in place, each ship a monument to motion they could no longer replicate. Inside Talon 1's secondary core, Joran met with tactical analyst Kid Harvin, formerly of Orbital Defense Command. Harvin spread out recovered telemetry maps across the bulkhead's magnetized grid. We've begun data extraction from the Sithar's fractured formation. Their internal comm traffic went silent after the node's destruction. But residual pings show fallback maneuvering, piecemeal, chaotic. Like a snake with no spine, Joran muttered. More like a machine dropped into sand, Harvin replied. They're waiting for leadership to reboot. But we took the plug out of the wall. Joran leaned closer to the marked symbols of the remaining Concord vessels. Their arcs had changed, once rigid, now uneven, repositioning erratically. Some ships had shifted laterally without reason. One had broken orbit entirely and drifted into the upper thermosphere without issuing a beacon. He turned back to Voss. Do we still have projection feeds from Taikar? On delay, but yes. Their council is watching us through remote links. We're being broadcast in all 47 languages. Then hold position, Joran ordered. Burn nothing. Charge nothing. Let them imagine we've got more. Taikar's council chamber rippled with unrest. Delegates murmured in fractured groups, analyzing the Earth formation on screen. The orbital grid showed all 4 Orion drive vessels still present. Engines quiet, hulls intact, forward arrays locked on Concord targets. They're not advancing, barked the representative from the Colvin Union. This is posturing. Posturing doesn't destroy a dreadnought, answered Mekvaret. You saw the footage. They sacrificed 1 vessel in a suicide strike. It doesn't indicate fleet capability, the Shellick envoy countered. They have not retreated. They have not burned out. That alone is power. Yora Hasku snapped. When fear becomes pause, strategy fails. The chamber cracked into debate. Some factions argued for immediate retaliation. Others begged for negotiation. A few, silent until now, questioned the Conqueror's entire premise of Earth's subservience. On Talon 1, Joran walked the narrow bridge corridor to the engineering alcove. He passed 2 medics, patching a technician whose hand had fused to a heat plate during launch stabilization. No one in the room complained. Even pain was rationed now. He sat on the floor beside a severed control shaft, back against the wall, breath slowing. Voss crouched next to him. You know this can't last. Joran nodded. But it doesn't have to. They stared at the readouts. Fuel cells flatlined, drive capacity down to emergency-level pulses, life support bleeding reserves through a cracked atmospheric loop. This isn't war, Voss said, looking out the viewport toward the frozen alien formation. It's theater. No, Joran replied. It's mythology, built 1 lie at a time. He tapped into the comm node, routed the channel to Earth's encrypted downlink. He didn't need full bandwidth, just enough to transmit 2 packets of imagery and a timing cue. The footage was recycled from their earlier fake reactor shutdowns, reversed and color-corrected to appear as fresh ship launches. To Taikar, it would look like 2 more Orion-class warships had come online. In the council chamber, alarm warnings echoed. 2 more signatures detected. Antarctic orbit, a Concord technician reported. They're multiplying, whispered one of the Vrenthian strategists. We don't know how many they've buried. Yor Hasku stood without speaking. The decision took 34 seconds. Concord protocol allowed full authority to override any fleet commander in the face of existential anomaly. He raised his hand. Withdraw to perimeter. Full retreat directive. Archive the footage. We will reassess from outside the system. Earth's cities didn't know. Civilians cheered in stadiums, lit bonfires across hills, waved flags from rooftops. They shouted into the sky as if the fleet above could hear them. Joran watched none of it. Instead, he sat with his head against the inner hull wall, eyes closed. We hold nothing, Voss said again. Quiet. We don't need to, Joran replied. They already gave it to us. Taikar's feed blinked off. and Earth ships, motionless and nearly broken, kept their place in orbit, held there not by power, but by what others feared it might still be. The debris field still shimmered outside Talon 1's viewport, broken pieces of the Sithar Dreadnought tumbling in uneven arcs as sunlight flared across torn hull fragments. The flagship hadn't drifted far. It floated in decaying orbit, crippled but intact, like a monument built from overconfidence. Inside Talon's command core, the air was thick with recycled grit. Oxygen filters struggled to keep pace. Every intake carried the weight of overheating circuits and insulation cooked beyond spec. Joran Velt wiped a line of dried blood from his cheek, pushed the override seal on the operations panel, and glanced across the makeshift squad gathered in front of him. Brevik Tor stood nearest the bulkhead, visor locked down, armor still dented from the Orion launch impact. His voice was calm when he spoke. "We breached the main corridor at the mid-spine. Exterior hull damage gives us access through their maintenance flank. Entry is unmonitored. Resistance, unknown." "Resistance is certain," Joran replied. "They're hurt, not helpless." He handed each man a thermal breach cutter, magnetized boots, and a rebreather capsule. Their suits weren't stealth-rated. This wasn't a mission designed for evasion, it was built around momentum. Hit hard, find the black box, extract whatever the Sithar left behind before they could burn it. A low vibration marked the docking clamp release. Talon's belly split open. The small boarding craft detached and slipped forward, trailing minimal signature. They approached the enemy Dreadnought from below, where the armor had buckled inward, torn by the kinetic ripple left from Talon's impact. Brevik guided them manually, gloved fingers firm on the analog controls. No autopilot, no reliance on systems that might stutter under alien interference. His jaw clenched tight as proximity lights strobed red, then green. They reached the breach point. The team latched their suits to the outer hull. Joran went first. His boots clamped onto the fractured plating with a static crackle, each step echoing into the emptiness of the disabled ship's outer corridor. The interior wasn't still. It twisted slightly with orbital decay, structural groans rippling through the walls as pressure shifted unevenly. The floor beneath their feet was covered in thin crystal growths, biological residue from the Sithar's own life support organics beginning to decay. Kier dropped behind him, then Vorn, followed by Brevik. The last two members, Tarek and Halv, secured the breach point with a magnetic clamp and triggered the backdoor seal. They moved inward. The hallway darkened the further they went, until only their suit lights remained. The walls pulsed faintly, not with electricity, but with nerve strands still twitching from the loss of neural command. The ship was no longer sentient, but it hadn't fully died. Tarek reached a side panel and triggered the data spike. "Earning frequency trace," he muttered, looking for central core relay. Before the scan could complete, a shriek tore through the hallway, sharp, not vocal, but pitched across an auditory threshold that bypassed translation. Shapes moved in the dark. Synthar warriors, stripped of command, no longer linked to the mental node, but still armed, still capable. They staggered toward the humans, each step guided by lingering reflex rather than tactic. Their movement was erratic, their coordination broken. But they had numbers. "Forward! Now!" Brevik roared, swinging his rifle into firing stance and unloading point-blank into the first attacker. Energy discharge lit the corridor, scattering bioarmor in chunks. Vorn took one through the left shoulder before returning fire. Tarek's scream was short. One of the Sithar cut through his chestplate before Brevik tackled the assailant and slammed a sidearm into its neck. Joran reached the relay room and forced the door open. Inside, the Sithar command node sat dormant, its spines fractured, connective filaments hanging like nerves ripped from bone. Vekthar stood in the center, one arm missing, the other hanging limp. He didn't react to the breach. He didn't speak. Joran aimed his weapon. "Your control is gone. I'm not here to kill you. I'm here to show your masters what's left." Vekthar looked up, eyes dull, expression unreadable. Revik stepped in behind Joran. His suit was shredded at the knee, one leg dragging behind him. He dropped beside the main relay and connected the data spike. They ran this whole war with thoughts, he said, voice gravel. They never imagined anyone could sever the brain. Are we transmitting? Joran asked. Now we are, Revik confirmed. The uplink connected. Earth's command saw the feed. So did Taikar. Across every channel used by Concord observers, the image of Vectar's defeated frame appeared, surrounded by wreckage, standing before Earth's surviving commander. Joran walked forward and grabbed the Sithar by the collar. He dragged him into frame. Let your council watch this, he growled. You built your power through suggestion. You controlled entire civilizations without needing armies. We stopped listening. Vectar blinked, but said nothing. Joran leaned closer. Tell them Earth doesn't bluff. You forgot what resolve looks like. Revik slumped to the ground behind him, coughing blood through his rebreather. The transmission cut. Inside the relay room, silence followed. Joran dropped to his knees beside Brevik. You get the spike out? Code ray, Brevik gasped. Full network map. They'll know everything now. He didn't speak again. Outside the relay room, Kier and Vorn secured the hallway. Half their team gone. But the mission was complete. The black box was theirs, and Earth had its story. Not of superior firepower, not of numbers, but of blood and cost and the decision to face myth with grit. Above them, the Sithar fleet drifted without command, and below, the world held its breath, waiting for the next move. The corridor to the Antarctic core chamber felt smaller now. Steel walls, once hollow with uncertainty, now bore the weight of something heavier than victory. Joran Vald's steps echoed with a rhythm not of power but of obligation. The war was over, but no one would say it out loud. Inside the command dome, banners of the newly formed Defense Synod hung from reinforced girders. The emblem, a sharpened arc around a fusion spiral, was etched into the glass conference table where 7 planetary delegates waited. The council wasn't ceremonial. It was permanent, founded in fire, codified in ash. Joran approached, the room falling quiet as he entered. General Ron stood to greet him. We thought you wouldn't come. I didn't plan to, Joran said. But I'm not here for ceremony. I'm here to confirm withdrawal status. Al-Sithar's signature's gone, Ron confirmed. Debris field cleared, defensive satellites now hold upper orbit, Orion cores are grounded, sealed under direct Synod command. And the drive blueprints? Compartmentalized. 5 nodes, unlinked. No single lab holds full schematics. Joran nodded, satisfied. Then he looked toward the new additions standing at the edge of the chamber. Representatives from 3 species unaffiliated with the Concord. Their languages had been translated manually, not through Taikar's old neural grid. They didn't speak much, but they were watching. Below the surface, in an isolated cryovault carved out of bedrock, the last surviving Sithar command vessel lay still. Tethered, dissected, catalogued. Inside, Vectar remained in containment. No restraints, no sedatives. He didn't try to escape. He didn't speak. Dr. Haven strode beside Joran through the observation wing. We ran neuromapping through 6 models, Halvin said. His telepathic centers are atrophying. Without the node, they lose the synchronization effect. Their biology doesn't just prefer unity, it requires it. Which means the entire Concord fleet was a house of cards, Joran replied. Coleman whisper kept it upright. Halvin said, You took the voice, the rest collapsed. Inside the cell, Vector stood motionless. His eyes tracked Joran through the glass, but he made no move. No expression. No plea. Not even hatred. Joran stared back. You wanted compliance. You demanded it through whispers and pressure. We gave you noise you couldn't decode. He turned away. Keep him breathing, he told Halvin. His silence teaches more than his words ever could. Above, Talon 1, what remained of it, now served as a beacon, not for navigation, for memory. The burned shell floated in static orbit, shielded, unmanned, not buried, not salvaged, a relic suspended above the world it defended, scarred but standing. The broadcast from Taikar stopped 2 days after the retreat. No message, no explanation. But the internal chatter leaked. Earth's embedded probes, tiny splices hidden in data streams left behind during negotiation pretenses, had caught just enough to confirm the shift. The Council had fractured. Panic spread through the outer sectors. Some races severed diplomatic links, others demanded access to Earth's data. Taikar responded not with unity, but with purges. Councils overturned, mid-level strategists executed, minders dismissed. Rumors spread of entire Sithar units dissolving from internal collapse. Telepathy turned to madness without leadership structure. And through it all, one term surfaced: doctrine, a phrase never spoken aloud by humans, coined by others. It meant nothing Joran had written, but everything he had done. A strategy of silence, of escalation through restraint, of power masked beneath plausible limits. Unleashed not by necessity, but by decision. Weeks passed. Earth's streets slowly returned to rhythm. No parades were held. There were no victory declarations. Names of the dead were etched into layered plates at the base of every Orion core silo, buried where tourists would never go, but soldiers would. Joran stood before one such plate in Ice Trench Station, where Brevik Tor's name had been carved, between 2 engineers who died sealing reactor gates during the ignition phase. A boy approached him, 12, maybe 13. He wore the crest of a post-war training program, his uniform slightly too large. "Sir?" the boy asked. Joran turned. "Was it true," the boy asked, "that we had nothing left to launch?" Joran knelt beside him. "We had one thing left," he said. "But it wasn't in orbit, it was down here." The boy didn't fully understand, but he nodded anyway. Back in the core bunker, Ron approached Joran for one final report. "You're being requested in Geneva," Ron said. "They want to rename the fleet." Joran shook his head. "Leave the name buried. Make the myth louder than the truth." "You really think they'll believe we're still armed?" "They already do," Georgian replied. "And we'll never correct them." He walked to the upper deck, looked out at the frozen bay where the last Orion drive had gone dormant. The towers around it flickered with passive energy. Not active, just enough to suggest maintenance. Enough to suggest possibility. And that was all they needed now. Earth wasn't feared because of what it had built. It was feared because it stopped pretending to ask for permission. Joran turned back toward the hatch. "Tell the next ones who challenge us," he said. "We didn't survive because we were stronger." He opened the airlock. "We survived because we stopped playing by their story." The world moved on, and Taikar never laughed again. Their greatest weapon was fear. Ours was that we never needed it to act.